Okay, fine. Right. So, what we are discussing in today's session about microservices or microservice. So, before I'm getting into microservices, I must tell you about the architectural pattern when we are working on any applications since beginning. So, if you see from the beginning, when we are working for IT applications for a very long time in the IT world, unless there is no architectural development, application writing code for that, right? So performing testing and all everything were difficult. That was the scenario. So hence it's always important for us to create an architecture, develop an architecture, and whatever the architecture were developed, based on that implementation will be taken place. Due to the technical people, if you say development team, testing team, these people are performing coding, etc. Right? So these people are good at writing the code for the particular project, all that. But when you see a project as a whole, it's combination of everything. It's combination of people, it's combination of processes, it's combination of systems and applications, everything put together. Everything put together is called uh, application. So performing a code for a particular project requires a programming language experience, which technical people have. But if there is any kind of changes happens in this architecture application, how this can be made and how these applications are interconnected with other applications, other systems, other infrastructure. This is something essentially needed when we are working on the project. Okay. So hence, it's always important for us to have the architectural understanding, how the architectures will be implemented, in what way this can be implemented. And importance of architectures development is one of the key and critical aspect in any application when we work on. In this regard, earlier we used to have an approach because architectures have an approach. That approach is used to called as monolithic approach earlier in the beginning time. Even now you can see most of the old projects, whichever we are working for a very long time, legacy projects, everything were in monolithic approach only. So what's the concept of monolithic approach? Monolithic concept is very simple. Whatever the components you are developing or whatever the features you are developing. For example, if you have taken our point of sale system as an example, we have a lot of features which are involved, lot of modules are involved. I'll give you a simple example. Right. So now, in the earlier days, whenever we used to develop the projects, if this was the application, okay, for example, or you can take any application. So these components are tightly coupled. These components are tightly coupled. Means it is coupled from among all, right? So you don't see any differences in context to the architecture because we used to develop architecture design for all these modules in a simple sense, I can say, right? So all these modules at a stretch so that you don't see any kind of differences between among all these, right? So everything were completely packed. If you want to make any change in one component, for example, in future, because earlier there was no such problem in the beginning times, because there is no volatility in requirements used to be taken place. But nowadays the situation was not that. Nowadays the situation was changed in such a way where we have to make some changes in the existing application. That's how the situation was, right? So there are a lot of changes happens in the requirements what we have taken, and we have to make changes in between. That's how the situation now. Earlier it was different. Now the situation was different. Means, for example, there are some changes happens in the application as far as the login process is concerned. They required some other additional services. They may require some two-factor, two-step verification process for login. Okay, like this, they require a lot of changes they want you to make in very lesser time. So this is something essentially important for us to make some changes in between. That is essentially required, that is essentially needed. So existing monolithic approach changes what we wants to make in between or in middle is really difficult in monolithic approach part, right? Because earlier it was different, right? So there was no such uh, changes required, so that it used to be happen in regular intervals. You don't see much difference in that. But nowadays the situation was not that. Nowadays the situation is in such a way, whatever the changes we wants to make are something volatile, right? So because the requirement what we have today may not be by tomorrow, right? So tomorrow they are coming up with some new thing. So monolithic approach is difficult. Why? Because it's a tightly coupled approach of architectural approach, I can say. So if you want to make any changes in middle of the component, any component you want to make some changes, automatically it will be affected and impacted the whole application as a whole. As a whole, the application will be impacted. So it's a difficult situation, it's a difficult scenario, because earlier the situations were different, but now volatility of requirements due to that reason impacting the existing application, impacting the existing process what we have is really challenging for us. Okay, so because it's really difficult for us to uh, address these changes, all that. So monolithic approach is not something suitable now, because again you have to do the testing, because for example you have made any changes in the middle of the project, any component, right? So in what way the other components got affected? Again, you have to do the testing from the beginning, right? So from end-to-end testing, everything you have to do. How long we do that, right? So because requirements might be changed once in every time, right? So because there is no specific duration for that, right? So because everything is agile now, right? So agile means even in shorter deliveries of iterations, we are developing and executing and delivering to the customers. At the same time, last minute changes are also happening in agile. That's how the structure of agile is. But whereas other things are not that, but agile has that structure. Hence, what is needed here? It's always important for us to work on the approach in such a way where even last minute changes also we have made, it shouldn't be impacted on the application as a whole. That was the scenario. This is what generally the reason why we are working for microservices now. The approach of architectural approach we are following nowadays is called microservices because of this reason. Earlier you don't have that, but now we have that, right? So microservices approach is what something we are following now. Earlier we don't have that situation. Now we have, because earlier we don't require, hardly we used to see the changes, but now we see a lot of changes happens in the project. So microservices approach, a style of architecture of microservices is what something is introduced. So in this microservices approach, the advantage is that whatever the application, whatever the components you are going to develop, right? So all these components are developing individually, right? So for every feature, for every functionality, there will be a separate component we are developing. So the complete design part, implementation, testing, everything happens for the particular component. If there is any change you require to make in between, in coming time, so you can make the changes at any point in time, right? So that it won't be impacted on the other application as a whole, right? So it is confined only for a particular component. For example, I can say like product grading. For example, inventory management system is a component we have developed. And we want to make some changes in the product grading. So if we want to make some changes in the product grading, we have to make sure whatever the changes are we making in this should be retained only for the particular component and it should not be impacted on the other areas. So what we have to do now, you have to make the changes within the existing stuff, right? So you cannot impacted this to the other areas, right? So it should not be. So that's the reason for every component. For example, inventory management system, we are creating a specific component by the architect team. Even for stock maintenance, maybe for billing, right? So we are creating a separate components as separate. So if there is any changes you want to make, you can make the changes on the specific small component so that it won't be impacted and at the same time testing time because you don't require to do the testing for the whole application. And if there is any change happens in a particular component, the other application will keep on run, right? So you don't need to stop the application not to work. For that specific component, you are making changes and your testing will also be confined only to that particular one. Okay, that is important. So this is the concept for microservices. This is the generally concept for microservices, which normally now and then we are using in the industry. Is it clear, understood or not?
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
this is what the concept called microservices is all about. Now, next, what are the principles of microservices? Because if you want to implement microservices and all, there are different principles we have, right? So these are different principles we are having. So which these principles are as follows. The first principle, let me explain. Yeah, the first principle is about principle of microservices is single microservices per single business responsibility, right? So that's what I have explained all this, right? So when there are any responsibilities we have taken for any of the project, so it is confined to the particular component and we are not making any changes in that, okay? We are not making any changes in between, okay? Single microservices per single business responsibility means you are making the changes in the particular component and this is impacting on the particular thing, right? So that you don't get impacted on the other areas. Because for every business responsibility, if you have taken our application, we have inventory management system, we have loss prevention module, we have billing module, right? So like this, we have lot of modules were there. So as we have lot many modules are there in the project, we want to make some changes in between. We want to make some changes in between. If we want to make the changes, what is required? It's always important for us to address these changes and all everything for a particular component. That was the basic thing, right? So single mic. So for example, if there are uh, 10 components we are developing, right? So 10 components, we are creating 10 microservices as separate from the scratch, from the beginning, you are developing. And the advantage is that you don't require to develop the architectural pattern at a time. You don't need it so that you don't see any complexity. So for every business responsibility, you are creating a component, you are creating a responsibility over in that. So that if there is any kind of changes you can make, it is easy for you to address so that it won't be impacted on the other project. Because while running the project, that project can run as usual. It can be used by the people as usual. They don't see any kind of changes in that, right? So that was the first point. Second point, microservices are independently deployable. That's what I said, right? So because as we are addressing a particular component as separate, it is independently deployable, right? So you can deploy this at any point in time. That's what I said. Independently deployable, right? So because you don't require to deploy the whole application at a time. So the particular microservices independently we can deploy, right? So the kind of dependencies we have, whatever the libraries we use in the project, right? Whatever the execution environments, because application we have different servers like. So we have web servers, we have application server. Web server means whatever the server you are going to maintain, it's a web server. Web server means internet based, because server won't be located in the particular location. It will be on the web, means virtual server, I can say. Right. So for that web server, different technologies we use like Tomcat, all that. Even for application server, we use something like WebLogic, WebSphere, JBoss. Right? So different application servers we use. So different servers are being used over here. Right. So web servers and all. So whatever the containers, whatever the virtual machines and databases, everything were independently deployable. So for example, if you have taken a virtual machine concept, virtual machine means you don't require any physical machine to deploy the application. Okay, you require a virtual machine means in one system, you have multiple virtual machines you have created. So multiple applications can be executed and we can run and execute multiple application on a single system by creating multiple virtual machines. So that infrastructure cost will reduced by the company to the company. Maintenance cost will be reduced, complexity will reduce, effort will also come down. Virtual machine concept is that. Means with the physical system, you have a virtual machine in between. So that subsequent changes we are making in that. That's the concept of virtual machines. Anyway, about the database means, right? So when you want to store the data, when you want to retrieve the data, databases are required. So these are independently deployable in microservices. That is what something which normally we have to do, right? So independently deployable, right? So what are the dependencies do we have? Whatever the libraries do we have when we are executing something, right? So execution environment. Microservices are independently deployable so that it won't be impacted on the other application. It won't be connected to the other application. So these are the two major principles you can see from the context of microservices as a whole. If we, being a business analyst, why are we learning? Because of this reason. Because I must tell you here, in what way being a business analyst, it is related about microservices, etc. Because this is the first question which has come to your mind. Because whatever I was explaining for a long time, these are all the technical stuffs. This is not something directly related to the role of a business analyst. But why do we learn and why are we learning, especially microservices? This is the question I think come across to everybody's mind. My answer is very simple. Then I'll explain later. Okay. So my answer is very simple. Earlier, the situation, if you are a BA, you will be confined only to gathering of requirements, understanding the business problem. That was the situation earlier. But now the scenario was not that. Now the scenario has completely changed. Nowadays, even knowledge over the technology is becoming important because multitasking is what something organizations are expecting you to perform. To an extent possible, I don't recommend you to learn programming. It is not needed. So that situation may arise in future. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just predicting. I'm not saying that happens for sure. So multitasking means even though you are a business analyst, your role, they may ready to allot any responsibility which being a business analyst you have to be rendered. It's not confined only for BA, even for other profiles also happening the same. For example, people who are working on the technical side, now people who are learning functional skills, domain skills they are learning. So other way around, it is happening. right? So because this is how the industry is evolving. So when it comes to the application architectural pattern point of view, why are we learning being a BA? Because the requirements, whatever you have developed, end of the day, if the application has to be performed successfully, implemented successfully, all these things are comes into consideration. That was the problem, right? So you have to make all these in one this thing, and you have to make some changes in that. That is where generally this concept of microservices, when it comes to the single microservices or independently deployable microservices and all, this is all something which you need to learn being a BA because of this reason. It doesn't mean that uh, we are working on the architecture, but support for sure for an architect, we have to provide being a BA to an extent possible from the non-functional requirements point of view, because functional requirements are not considered for architecture, won't be taken into consideration. But non-functional requirements will be considered more. Non-functional means what? Scalability, performance, load balancing, right? So these are all non-functional requirements we call it as. These non-functional requirements are having a higher priority than anything else. Non-functional requirements are more important. So because performance of the application, scalability, this is non-functional. So when they are creating an architecture, they focus more on that. Application has to perform well. So accuracy must be 100%. 100 means 99.99% accuracy is required. At the same time, there shouldn't be any kind of changes happens in the existing project. So these are the considerations, these are the aspects they will be taking into account. So when they are building the application and all these things, they have to be taken into account and they have to build the application accordingly. So non-functional requirements are the high priority items for architecture to develop, even for system designing. As in when, if you remember, when I explained about the system design part in the earlier sessions, I stated that same point. Even you need to understand the non-functional side of the project. So this is something which is essentially required for us to uh, know about the microservices, right? So how different this is from monolithic and now, right? So this is something required, right? So I hope you understood. Now, this is what generally the concept principles of microservices were all about. Now, how it is different from microservices to SOA? Okay, so what is that? So before you are getting into the difference between microservices to SOA, first you must be knowing about what is SOA stands for. SOA stands for service oriented architecture, right? So service oriented architecture. You can see this is what we call it as SOA, which stands for service oriented architecture. Just give me a second. Right. So this is what generally a service-oriented architecture is, because this is one of the architectural style, what you can see. This is one of the architectural style and all. When there is any kind of pattern of service development we do for any of the applications and all, because for example, if you want to reach the business value, okay, because for every application, there will be some business value. So that business value we have to reach. That's where generally return of investment comes into picture. Means if you want to get the return of investment, right? So because customer is spending some X amount of money. So against to that, what they expect? They expect some quality deliverables end of the day back to that. This is where generally core values comes into picture. Means if you want to develop a service-oriented architecture for the project, the major reason developing about service-oriented architecture, because this is also one of the architectural style normally as like microservices, because it is there for a very long time. Service-oriented architecture is not something we are implementing now, because microservices came recent times, but not SOA. SOA was there for a long time, because when you are developing application, you are a BA, you have identified and you have addressed the requirements where you got a clarity over, and you got a confirmation finally from the customer that yes, it is according to my goals. Okay, you got the confirmation, but how it happened? Because we as a business analyst, we will be on the front face, so we don't know what was the effort a technical team has made to perform this well. Okay, that is one of the core area. So that is where generally service oriented architecture works in that region, right? So it majorly focusing on the business value. So what is, because you have to know the difference between these two, right? So what is microservices and how it is different from service oriented architecture? That's what I'm trying to explain here. Microservices make your application flexible to make changes at any point in time. That is the way of microservices architecture style of functioning is. That functioning is different. Microservices, individual components we are developing, and we are making changes on the individual component so that it won't be impacted on other areas. That was the concept for microservices. But whereas when it comes to the service-oriented architectural style, architectural pattern is different. Service-oriented architecture pattern is the first one about the business value. We focus more on the business value. The difference I am saying, okay, because earlier we used to have, because of course people who are having a technical expertise, right? So definitely these people will ask you question, because of course newcomers may not be asking, but usually technical people will have a doubt. Whoever is working on the architecture and all, most of the people will get a doubt, because SOA is there, because SOA is also more or less the same, right? So to address the present situations, SOAs is useful. So then why are we going for microservices, right? So what was the reason behind, right? So because for them to answer, this is useful to you. Because when it comes to the value systems of application, when we are developing, while we are implementing service-oriented architecture, the major reason is this. The first one about the business value. Business value means whatever the value you want to provide for a particular business. That is something which we have to be addressed and which we have to be taken care of 100%. Means we need to provide 100% business value for the project. That is essentially required. Creating a business value. When business value will be increased, when whatever the desired goals which customer wants to achieve, right? So if they have achieved, then it gives you a business value, right? Next, quality of services, what they are giving to their customers. If it is increased automatically, it gives a business value for you. So business value is the ultimate point. Business value is an ultimate motto behind creating service-oriented architecture for any of the project. This is not something confined for one. This is refined, this is confined for, this is related for everything, of course. So business value is the ultimate point, right? So one point to be noted, we need to know about the business value, point number one. So providing value for the business is the first point to be considered. Next, strategic goals. Strategic goals means every organization, even then you see, every organization has some business strategy to implement their vision. Okay, they implement their target goals, what they want to achieve. So every organization will implement their strategies. So to reach that strategic goals, even service-oriented architecture, technically speaking, okay, as a BA, you cannot see it on the screen. But once you feel that it was succeeded, right? So on what basis? Based on the implementation of microservices, service-oriented architecture, that was happened. Otherwise, it won't happen. So technical people, architect people should also consider these areas because it's not something that technically I have knowledgeable I'm doing, right? It was not the case. So they should even understand this well. So they should understand about the business value. They should understand about the kind of strategy goals which are required over here. At the same time, they must be knowing about the shared services, right? So what are the services do we have? That shared services are something known for them well in advance. At the same time, flexibility. Flexibility is also important because flexibility, even we have even in microservices also. Microservices also have that flexibility. But when it comes to the implementation of service-oriented architecture from the value systems, uh, one business value we have. Second was about the strategy goals. What are the goals we were about to achieve and all. Next, what are the shared services we were about to develop, followed by the flexibility. So these are the four important core values which service-oriented architecture majorly expect us to perform. That's where generally the concept of SOA came into existence. So the difference between microservices to service-oriented architecture is this. Okay, because microservices architecture, once the implementation when we are making, it shouldn't be having any implementation and all everything we do. That's where generally service-oriented architecture to microservices difference is. Because when we are implementing SOA in application, whatever the service level decomposition we do, right? So to reach the business goals, strategic goals, and all everything, we focus on that. But microservices never see what was the business goal they wants to achieve, business value, because microservices never see about the business value. Microservices never see about the strategy goals. They want to make application flexible. And if you want to make changes in the existing application, it must be able in a position to do it at any point in time. That was the focus about microservices. Microservices never see the business value. Microservices never see the strategic goals to be achieved. They never see that, right? So you are implementing the project, components are tightly coupled. It must be loosely coupled so that any changes happens in between, we have to make the changes. That was the ultimate motto behind implementing microservices concept. But SOA don't only not only see that. SOA doesn't have this sort of availability. SOA don't focus on this, right? So SOA focus more on the business goals point of view, business value point of view, strategic goals point of view. That was the point of view which SOA is having, SOA implementation in this context. But microservices is not. Microservices is a deeper thing. Whatever the composition of the projects is, the components you are developing, those you are dividing into multiple parts till execution of environment and all. So these are the two major things which you can see when it comes to the differences when you're trying to understand the difference between microservices to service-oriented architecture is this. Is it clear? Everyone.
Raj, sorry, I have a quick question. Can you
Right.
actually tell me, like in example wise, like about microservices and SOA? I understood the description, but
Hmm.
be easier if you can explain to me in, with 3 examples.
Yeah, it is very simple for you, Tanvir. For example, uh, let's say, for example, we are developing a community protection app. Community protection app means I'll give you an example. Two different examples I'll give. Guys, listen carefully. For example, we are developing a community app. What is meant by community app? For example, there was a gated community. Lot of cars, two-wheelers, four-wheelers will come inside and it will go. Come inside and it will go. And there is a specific allotment for the two-wheeler as well as four-wheeler parking will be provided by the community people. Whoever has entered into the community, the gated community, residential community, They have to park their vehicles in that specified time, in that specified place which was given. For that, there will be some stickers or something they will be provided. So those vehicles only will go and park. And if there is any kind of additional vehicles came for their family, friends came and all everything, they will be allotted for a separate parking where visitor parking place will be there, where they have to put their vehicles. Like this, there are a lot of things are there for a community, right? So what community application do? Community app, something like MyGate kind of, right? So there are a lot of apps now in there. So we are developing a community app. So when it comes to the community app, right? So as an example, if you see as a community app, is this community app do you think any community have any kind of strategic goals in future as separate? Because this is all something to protect services for the residents who are residing within the community, right? It's not a business application. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes or no? That's not
Yes.
a business application. It's an application which protecting the existing services of the employee residents who are residing in the particular community. It is not impacting on the business, right? So it is nothing to do with business here. Now, next, there are some rules and regulations as far as the security is concerned. Community people might have taken a decision. Subsequent changes we have to make. Am I right? Yes or no? For example, earlier there was no visitor parking place. Okay, earlier. Now we have identified there are a lot of vehicles coming from outside for visitors, especially on the weekends. For example, earlier we used to have a space outside of the community. We have an open space where people used to park there. But now and then that open space got occupied and they were constructing buildings. There was no space at all. Now, community people have decided to provide a parking space, especially for the people who are coming as visitors. Maybe for hours, maybe for an hour, 2 hours they stay and they'll go back. So if there is any kind of change you want to make in that particular community, we are providing this as an additional service to them. This is nothing to do with any goal to be achieved with. This is nothing to do with any enhancement of the business because this is not something as an enterprise. Do you understand clear, Tanvir? Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So microservices used in this because what is that you are doing? You are developing a component different. For example, entry exit for the vehicles. You are creating a separate component. Entry exit for the mates because mates who are working in the flats, whoever is coming and going outside. Right. So you are creating a separate component for them. Entry exit for the mates. Entry exit for the vehicles. Either it can be two-wheelers as it can be of four-wheelers. Entry exit for the cars. That too in this classification we have one more classification nowadays. Recently we have added is guest parking. Okay. Entry exit for the employees who are residing inside. Okay. Because inside means plumbers, technicians, electricians, all these. Next, this is all something for inflow and outflow of the vehicles and as well as the people who are coming in and are going out for the community. Now, within the community, if there are any problems, right? So electricity problem was there, some plumbing issues was there. They have to raise the ticket, right? So whenever there is a ticket raised within the community, that must be addressed by the respective person and he has to solve it, right? If it was not solved within the time, it will be escalated to the next level. So this is a structure. Yeah. So this is the structure which is nothing to do with any business value. This is nothing to do with any strategic goals. But these are the different components which are always required for us to develop as separate. Why? Because, for example, as I told you, due to the security reasons or for many other reasons and all, they have made changes in their policies. Because of the policies, there is some specific change we have to make for a particular component. For that, generally microservices are being used. Is it clear now, Tanvir?
Yes,
Or
correct.
no?
Yeah.
Am I right? Everyone, Anthony, Gurpreet. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. Now, second point. When it comes to the service-oriented architecture, service-oriented architecture style is there from the beginning, because this is more or less something majorly useful for enterprise applications majorly, because microservices is an inbuilt one, because this is nothing to do with commercial projects. Even in non-commercial projects also microservices architecture is being used. This is not something specified not only for enterprise projects, not only for business projects. It can be used for anywhere, right? So you don't see any difference in it. It can be seen anywhere. That's not an issue. But whereas when it comes to the service oriented architecture is not that, because service oriented architecture ultimate goal, service oriented architecture ultimate vision is to satisfy the business value, right? So because here you don't see any business value in microservices, you are focusing more on the flexibility. Microservices focusing more on the flexibility. At the same time, you're reducing the effort of doing the testing again and again from the beginning. That kind of things you are reducing. Where microservices concept majorly for that. Either it can be an enterprise application, or it can be an business application, or it can be a cloud application, or it can be a remote application. End of the day, architectural style of microservices is to make flexibility within the existing component what we are using. But when it comes to the service oriented architecture, goal is not that. Service oriented architecture we are developing from the context of improving the business value of a business. Particular business has some business value. They wants to increase their value, or business value means quality of services. Quality of services they wants to increase. So for that, business value need to be increased here. At the same time, whatever the goals they wants to achieve, for that it is being used. At the same time, what are the shared services? What are the different services do we have? Right. So for example, you can see here itself. For example, there were two databases we have. Hmm. Here you can see there are two different databases we have. So when there are two different databases, there are different service layers we have. What are the different service layers we have? For example, we are searching. This is about medical app. Okay, medical app, and I am showing you the medical app here, right? For example, searching the patients, right? That is one service. Scheduling appointments, one more service. Prescribing medicines for the patients, one more service. Order lab and test, one more service. These are all we call it as service layer. Whatever you can see all here, this is what we call it as service layer. So these service layer is the ultimate border, because when it comes to the searching of patients or scheduling of appointments and all everything, this may be required to enhance the quality services maybe in future, right? So you may require to implement, for example, you want some searching of patients and all, wherein you may be required to develop some desktop application. For example, customer representative sitting on the screen, right? So she has to see, she's providing a service to the customers about the patient searching, right? So how many patients came today, right? So what was the status, etc. Now, when it comes to the scheduling of appointments, you are creating a separate web application. Why scheduling of appointment as a web application? Because customer can schedule the appointments anywhere across the places, right? So through web, through means through internet. Through internet, they can schedule the appointments. So if you want to schedule appointments and all, you have to develop web application only. Why? Because people should have a provision to should have a provision to deploy, should have the provision to take an appointment online. Online means web, through internet they have to. So other applications are not useful. Other applications are not useful. So what you have to do, you have to develop a web application to schedule the appointments. Next, for example, prescribing of medicine, right? So prescribing of medicine, for example, you want to develop some mobile app, right? So mobile app, because for example, doctor is having a mobile. So doctor is having a mobile app in his mobile or her mobile. What they can do, they can simply prescribe the medicine in the app itself. So that automatically it will be sent to the particular patient ID will be there. So automatically prescription of medicines will be sent to them directly. At the same time, for example, there is some test which was ordered, right? So they want to see the order test and all. So there may be required some tablet application. So there are different applications we are developing here for different reasons. For example, desktop applications we are developing. This is for the benefit of customers, front office executives to use it. Web applications we are developing for the benefit of scheduling appointments and all, because this can be done online. So patient medicines, this is required. We are using some mobile application we are developing, or mobile app or service you are developing. Service. I don't say application as a whole. I can say service. Service we are developing because the doctor can prescribe a medicine online directly to them. Next, at the same time, there are some lab results scheme where lab results we wants to see. For that, they may be required some tablet application to be developed. So these are the things which are required for service-oriented architecture. But when it comes to the microservices architecture, how many applications you are going to develop, for what purpose and all, everything they don't need. What they want is for a particular every service or every component, they create a separate microservices as separate. Either it can be a desktop service, or it can be web service, or it can be a phone level thing, or it can be ordering of lab test, or it can be scheduling of appointments. They create a separate service here. They create separate components for these as separate. Searching of patients, they create a separate component. Scheduling of appointments, separate microservices. Prescribing of medicine, separate microservice. Ordering lab test, separate microservices. So we are creating a separate microservices for all these, because you may want to have some changes in between due to your requirements and all. You may require to make some changes. In this level, microservices are being used, which is microservice. Do remember, it's not macro. Macro means large scale. Micro means internal. This is microservice. But when it comes to the service-oriented architecture, is applied for the whole application you are developing. Because end of the day, you have to reach to the business value of a particular client to whom you are addressing with. You need to reach the strategic goals. At the same time, shared services, flexibilities, everything we have to be taken care of. Clear? Any questions? Is it clear or not?
Yes, thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. I'm good.
Yourself, Anton, Tanvir, Gurpreet.
No,
Yeah.
no questions.
Right. So this is generally the difference you can see. Yeah. So this is what generally the difference you can see from microservices to service-oriented architecture. Now we are going to discuss about what are the characteristics of a microservice, because if you want to work on microservices, what are the characteristics it works? Okay. It works on what are the different characteristics microservices works on. Microservices characteristics are separate as follows. You can see there are 6 characteristics per microservices. Means if you want to implement microservices for any of the project, microservice, again repeating again and again, microservice, it's not a macro service. Microservice means individual components. Individual, each and every component is called micro. Okay. Macro means large scale, right? So it's not macro service, it is microservice. So microservices have some characteristics. What was the characteristics? The first one, services are first-class citizens. The first point means service is an ultimate motto to develop microservices. What is service? Whatever the desired results customer want to see either today or tomorrow, that's where generally we call it as services are all about. So when customer will be happy, when there is any flexibility of changes, if anything required in between, if you are making, then customer will be happy all the time. That's the reason why. Yeah. So that is the reason why services will be the first class citizens, means services will be the high level priority. That's what we were about to say, right? That is point number one. Second, microservices are lightweight. Why lightweight? Because for every component, we are creating a separate microservices as separate, right? So you are not developing the application, everything as a whole, right? Not complete application you are not developing. So you are developing an application in different components. So different components, you are developing the microservices. So microservices are lightweight. You don't require to develop the whole application. You are not developing one microservice. For every individual component, you are developing a microservices, so which is lightweight, right? So because you don't see heavy, because if you are developing an architecture for all the components at a time, then it's a heavyweight. Because microservices character is not that. Microservices always will be light. For example, you're developing a component for inventory management system. It is confined only for inventory, not for other things. The same way for other applications also. That is second. Next, microservices will be used with the polyglot architecture. Right? So polyglot architecture. Normal polyglot architecture means when there are any architectures you are developing, there are some certain guidelines and as well as standards will be provided by the architect, right? Because see, architecture you are not allowed to develop as in when you know, okay? You cannot do that, right? So there are some standard set of practices, standard set of rules and regulations which everybody has to follow. So microservices is something with polyglot architecture. Polyglot architecture means polyglot architecture provides some set of rules and regulations, standards, policies, procedures. Whoever developing an architecture has to develop, because this is all something which is for the betterment of increasing the service of the application, makes flexibility, wherein whatever the desired business results a customer wants to see in regular intervals. So for that reason, there are some standard practices, standard principles, guidelines, and standards which we have to follow. So polyglot architecture means that. Polyglot architecture defines you the set of rules and regulations, standards, procedures, and all, which are useful and beneficial to develop the microservices architecture. This is one more aspect, comes under microservices with polyglot. Next, automation in a microservice environment. That's what I have told you a lot of times, right? So there is a process of automation where, for example, if you are developing an component as separate, it can be changed automatically. Means depends on the requirements and all. You can make some changes in that application. Again, you can integrate with other components and all. That's the reason why nowadays we are using DevOps environment. If you remember, when I explained about the DevOps environment, I told you there is a creation of DevOps pipeline we are creating. Whenever we are creating this pipeline, what happening is that if there is any kind of changes we wants to make in between, we are making some changes in between. That's where something we have to see. That's the reason why it is important nowadays, where it has to be automated, because everything cannot be do manually, right? Because manual intervention, of course, human intervention will be there, but we cannot do everything manually, right? So there must be an automation process where if there is any kind of changes and all, it has to be address the changes and make the changes subsequently is what something we have to do in this. That's the reason why automation process. We have to create an automation process in the microservice, because we never know when the opportunity, when the requirements comes, right? So when the changes we want to make, when we have made the changes, automatically it has to be tested, it has to be deployed immediately. So there shouldn't be any kind of manual intervention you do. Human intervention there, but you are not doing it manually, because there are hundreds of components, hundreds of microservices we develop for large scale applications, hundreds of microservices we develop, hundreds of testing we have to perform, right? So that is not something feasible for us to do it manually. because there must be an auto process we have to create. So automation in microservices environment is also one of the character for microservices. We have to use it. Next, microservices with supporting ecosystem. Because microservices is not something individual on its own. That's the reason why, if you remember, I explained about service-oriented architecture. Because service-oriented architecture is in supporting ecosystem, because microservices only for the component level. Service-oriented architecture completely about the services of the application, which reaches the business value, etc. All that. That's the reason why microservices should also support the ecosystem. Ecosystem means whatever the service-oriented architecture ecosystem for the application you are developing, it must support. Then only microservices has a value. So it always supports. In what way it supports? Because microservices has an advantage. You can make flexible changes as in when required. That itself nothing but the supporting to the ecosystem. Means any changes, last minute changes are also advised for you to make the changes, right? So that was the one more advantage. Next, microservices are distributed and dynamic. That's what, because this is not something tightly coupled. This is end of the day, these are all loosely coupled. Loosely coupled means for every microservices, we are creating a separate, so that whatever the microservices you are creating, it's a distributed environment. For every component, we are creating a separate microservices and all. It is distributed and dynamic. Dynamic means it's not static. Dynamic means any changes required in future, we have to make subsequent changes into the existing one. That's what the mentality of dynamic. Static means it is standard. Once you develop, that's it, right? So it is standard on its nature. You don't require to make any changes in that. But whereas dynamic means that nature of the particular thing is dynamic. Means you have to make the changes again and again in this. That's what generally the nature of dynamics comes into picture. So these are the characteristics of microservices which normally we have. Is it clear? Understood? Everyone?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Clear? Right. So
Yes.
this is all about session about microservices. What microservices? Why microservices? What's the reason behind developing microservices? So this is what microservices concept, which being a business analyst, you must be good and you must be familiar with. This is what is needed. Any questions? You please go ahead. Any questions? Okay, right. So, okay, fine. So this is the point. So, and tomorrow I'm not taking, because tomorrow I'll be on leave, because I'm going on a personal this thing. I won't be available tomorrow evening, because
Tomorrow or Saturday?
Saturday.
I mean, that's what Saturday. I mean next session, Saturday. Yeah, tomorrow means Saturday, I'm saying, not Thursday evening. Thursday evening to you, right? Now it is Thursday evening for you. Okay. I mean next session. Next session means Saturday. Saturday evening I won't be available. Sunday again I'll be back. Sunday I'm coming back. Saturday I'll be on traveling, so it is hardly difficult for me to. I may come late, right? So because this is session time is at evening 6:30, so I may be doubtful, right? So while returning due to the traffic, I may be doubtful to come back on time. So there is a suspicion, right? So that's the reason why Saturday I'm not taking. Sunday I will take, and possible be ready. Sunday I can take some extra time so that I can compensate Saturday class on Sunday. Okay. Sunday we may have some extra time I'll take. I'll give some break in between and I'll continue. Okay. Sunday we may have some extra little session. And please do remember. So I'll take some extra time and cover. First Saturday I'm not taking the class. Second class I'm not taking. So I will compensate on Sunday. Okay. Clear?
Yes.
Clear. Clear to you, Tanvir?
Yes.
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 Yourself, Gurpreet
Yes.
and
Yes, Raj.
right. So I'll try to compensate on Sunday instead of Saturday because I may be doubtful, right? So whether it can come on time, because if the class is late time, then it is different. But ours is at 6:30, right? And I'm going on a personal trip. So I'll be back on Sunday again. Sunday I'm coming. Sunday as usual we have class. That's it. Okay.
Thank you, Raj. Goodbye.
That is it. Okay.
Okay,
So
thank
this
you.
is all about microservices, and to Sunday, of course, we'll come up with some other new topic. Okay. See you.
Okay. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hmm.